Today I'll show how to recharge a vehicle's air conditioning, featuring my imported 80 series Land Cruiser. I picked up this gauge set on Amazon, and I'll have links to everything in the description. Hang it from the hood latch and I'm ready to go. This 94 VX Limited is right-hand drive, but everything AC related is the same as a left-hand drive. And down here is the AC compressor. Notice this cap with the L. That's the low pressure line fitting. And here's the high pressure one. There's another high pressure fitting here, but I'm not using that one. So just use these two. I believe 94 is the first year the Land Cruiser came with R134a refrigerant. So if your vehicle is older and still uses R12, it will have to be converted to R134a before doing what I'm going to do today. Never mix R12 and R134a. They're not compatible and damage to the compressor will occur. R12 uses smaller fittings, so any R134 equipment won't even fit R12 fittings. So first unscrew these plastic caps and put them somewhere safe. Notice the yellow dye on the low pressure fitting. Dye is often put into the system to find leaks because the dye glows with a UV light. So chances are this isn't the first time it's been refilled with refrigerant. And the cap on the high pressure side. Notice the high pressure fitting is bigger. There's no way to mix them up when connecting the lines. So it's impossible to hook things up backwards with R134a. There's low and high knobs on the manifold, and I want to make sure they're all the way closed. Then pull the end of the hose off the holder. Just pull back and it releases like an air hose or hydraulic fitting. And make sure the knob on this fitting is all the way closed. Everything must be closed to start with. Here's the low and high fittings side by side, and you can see how much bigger the high one is. And they both connect the same way. Put the hose fitting over the line fitting, pull up on the collar, press the hose fitting on, and that click means it's locked on. Now I need a stable surface for the pump. And this beautiful handcrafted OSB serving tray works great. And the vacuum pump. Unscrew this cover and pull off the exhaust cover. I already filled the pump with oil according to the instructions. Now get the yellow hose. And these have rubber gaskets built into the hose fittings, so I only need to tighten them hand tight. No need to use pliers or any tool to tighten them. So after everything is connected, like I have here, I'm going to slowly open the low fitting. Listen for it. Did you hear that? That was the pressure entering the hose from the metal line. And then do the same on the high pressure side. And now, looking at the manifold, there is some pressure in the system. Just not enough to produce cold air. So I put some markers on here to show where my pressure should be. I'm about 75 on the low side and 80 on the high pressure side. And I checked the factory service manual, and I want to be between 21 and 36 on the low side, and 198 to 227 on the high pressure side. If you don't own one of these, I'll put a link in the description. Worth every penny. The manual lists the pressure in MPa, which is megapascal. So I searched online and found a calculator to convert MPa to PSI. And that's how I came up with these numbers, to match the unit of measurement on the gauges. And made these tape markers so I can quickly see if I'm where I need to be without counting all the increments on the gauge every time. Now I need to start the engine and get the refrigerant circulating. Uh-oh. Something sounds horrible. Let's see what the heck that was. Look at that. The fan was hitting the hose. I'll leave that little blooper in. Learn from my mistakes. Alright, let's try again. That sounds better. Turn the fan on high and AC on. Because this is a VX Limited, it also has rear AC on and ice maker on. Now you can hear the compressor is running. Check the gauges. And now I have no pressure, 0 psi on the low side, and about 110 psi on the high side. I've left the engine run for a couple minutes with the AC on, and the pressure is still the same. So I can shut it off and go on to the next step. Now it's time for the vacuum pump. Make sure to remove the exhaust cap before turning it on. And flip the switch. It sounds noisy at first, but once I open up the knobs on the manifold, it quiets down because it's able to pull any pressure from the system. And let it run for a few minutes. The pump has been running for a minute, and you can see the pressure has dropped below 0. But I want it to go all the way to -30. After a few minutes, both gauges should read -30 psi, and this is perfect. Now I'm going to close both the low and high side on the manifold and shut off the pump. So now I have -30 psi on the AC system, and the manifold is closed, so everything is sealed. The only way this pressure will change is if there's a leak somewhere in the vehicle's AC system, which, if it's low on refrigerant, there probably is a leak somewhere. So I'll check back in an hour and see if the pressure changed. Alright, it's been an hour, actually an hour and a half, and it looks like the low side moved a tiny bit. Hardly at all, but maybe 1 needle width. Same here, about a needle width from -30. So there's a very tiny leak. I could go through the vehicle's AC system with a UV light and look for the yellow dye that's already in the system. But with the center console cooler ice maker and the rear AC, which uses a whole separate system behind the rear panel, this vehicle is loaded with AC lines. I'd have to pull out a lot of the interior to inspect everything. Ain't nobody got time for that. Not to mention the cooler console and rear AC were never options here on North American 80 Series Land Cruisers. So even if I found the leak, good luck getting any replacement parts. Now, I still had some pressure in the system of my 80, but if the gauges initially showed no pressure at all, which might be due to a worse leak or just replacing a component of the system, such as the compressor, then I would need to run the vacuum pump for another 30 minutes or so before starting to refill the AC system to ensure that there's no moisture or humidity inside, because moisture will take away from the efficiency of the air conditioning system. And if the pressure of the AC system isn't higher than the atmospheric pressure, then moisture from the outside air could enter. But that doesn't apply here because the pressure of the system didn't get down to 0. So, before adding more R130a refrigerant, I'm going to add this can of stop leak first. You can get these at parts stores, or I'll put a link in the description for these. Just read the instructions because this contains PAG oil, which is only R134a compatible. If your vehicle was R12 converted to R134a, there could still be traces of the old mineral oil in the system. You're better off buying stop leak with ester instead of PAG, because ester is compatible with R12 and R134a. These are self-sealing cans, which are nice because you don't have to use them all in one application. And here's the tap for the cans. After I screw this on the can and turn the handle clockwise, you can see there's a little metal point that comes down and presses into the opening on the top of the can. There's a little psh noise when it opens. Then it comes out here into the yellow hose. Again, the manifold should already be closed. Don't open them now, or outside air and humidity will enter the AC system because there's a vacuum right now. I'm done with the pump. The yellow hose will now be used to add stop leak and then R134a to the system. First, there's an adapter that goes on the hose. Then I can screw on the tap. And this needs to be turned all the way out from the can, counterclockwise, and thread it all together. Remember, just hand tight is good. And now, screw the can onto the tap. Hand tight. I'm done with the pump, so I can get it out of the way. And now, tap the can. There goes the psh. So, the contents of the pressurized can are now in the yellow hose. There's also some air in this yellow hose, and I don't want that entering the manifold and going into the AC system. The pressure from this can will push air as well as the stop leak into the system. But I only want the stop leak entering the manifold. So, unscrew this brass cap, and there's a purge valve. I have a paper towel to catch any of the dye. Just put that over the valve and press the valve with a small screwdriver. It's a Schrader valve, just like a wheel has, but larger. Oh, you know what? I didn't have the can upside down. Try with the can upside down and see if the dye comes out. There it is. Not a huge amount, but I still don't want it spraying in my face. Mikey took a face full of AC dye way back in the day when we were pulling the engine on the 7 Series BMW, and it's pretty nasty stuff. With the line purged and the can upside down, it's time to start the engine. And again, I have the AC on with the fan on high, the ice maker console on, and the rear AC on. That way the stop leak will go through the whole system. Now I'm slowly opening up the low pressure side of the manifold by turning the knob counterclockwise. There it is. Now the contents of the pressurized can will enter the system. Hold the can upside down so it all goes in. Give it some shakes. And looking at the sight glass, I can see there's still stop leak entering the manifold. Give it some more shakes. Probably about done. It's only a 3-ounce can. No more bubbles in the sight glass. Now close the low pressure on the manifold by turning clockwise. Now turn this out counterclockwise to close the seal on the can and keep the pressure in the hose from escaping. Make sure all these fittings stay tight. I have to be careful that I don't let this adapter come loose, because there's pressure in the line and this dye will spray out everywhere, and then I'll have to bleed the line again. Done with the stop leak. Now it's time for the R134a. I'll put a link to this in the description. Just hand tight and turn clockwise to open the can into the line. The 80 series has a nice place up front here where I can set the can upside down and slowly open the low pressure side of the manifold. The compressor just kicked on. Look at the bubbly in the sight glass. I have Freon flowing into the system from the can. The compressor doesn't kick on if the pressure is too low to prevent damage. So everything is going perfect. And the Freon is clear, so there's no more red stop leak in the manifold. The can will get really cold as it empties. Condensation on the sight glass from the cold. And the pressure, the compressor just kicked on. Watch the PSI drop. All the Freon is going into the AC system. The sight glass is empty, this can is done. I closed the manifold, disconnected the empty can just like before, and tapped the next can of Freon, opened the manifold, and held the can upside down, giving it an occasional shake to get the last of the Freon out. When that one was empty, I closed the manifold, tapped the next can, and opened the manifold. Alright, I've done 2 cans so far, plus the can of stock leak, and it's getting pretty close with this can of R134a. So I closed the manifold, opened it back up a bit. The high side is still creeping up. I'm over on the low side, but that will drop as the high side goes up. It's at 220 and about 35 on the low side. So I'm going to close it for a couple minutes and see if it drops anymore. Alright, it's been a couple minutes and you can see the PSI did go down a little on the high side. So I'll open up the low side and add a little more R134a. The high side on the manifold always stays closed. The third can of R134a is empty. It's a good time for a temperature check. This is just a food thermometer from the kitchen. Just set it in the vent here and check back in a few minutes. In the meantime, I'll keep watching these gauges to see if the PSI is still good after the compressor kicks on. Compressor kicked on and it sounds like it's struggling. Look at that drop in pressure. I'm going to tap another can. Probably only need a little bit from this one. Man, that sounds loud. The compressor gets really loud every time the pressure drops. Here it goes again. There. Have some more R134a. That'll shut you up. You guys think my compressor is on its way out? Close the manifold and let the pressure make its way over to the high side. I'm right around 220 and 40, 39, 38, 37. I might call that good. Let's check the thermometer. It's at 57 degrees. Let's try a center vent. The console cooler is getting cold. It's starting to make some frost where the ice cube trays go. I did a whole video on how this thing works. I'll put a link in the description. It'll probably work even better after today. Now we're down to 50 degrees. Gauge check. I'm about exactly 36 on the low side and 220, 222 on the high side. These fluctuate a bit depending on the compressor and how many components are being used. So I'm fine being a little below the max PSI. That's a wrap, folks. Make sure the knob is all the way closed. Good. The compressor is happy and quiet now. It sure does get noisy though if the pressure drops. I guess that's a good way to know if I have a leak somewhere. But I don't know how healthy that noise is. I just closed the tap, and this fourth can is still maybe 2/3 full. So there's going to be some pressure left in the line. So I need to purge the pressure from the line before I unscrew the tap and adapter, because I don't want this to spray all over my hands. That was cold. Now I can unscrew the can. And turn off the engine. Feels good in here. And the temperature is just over 40 degrees. Let's turn everything off. And let me show you what happens. The pressure goes up on the low side and down on the high side. Don't worry, that's perfectly normal when the AC isn't being used and the compressor isn't running. Let's shut her down. And I'll show how to disconnect everything. First, I'll cut this zip tie carefully. Now reach down here and close the low pressure side, turning counterclockwise, and same for the high side. And then pull up on the base of the fitting to disconnect it from the line. Except it's pretty hot from the engine running. I'm gonna get a glove. There it is. And that's it. And grab the low and high caps. Screw those back on. Before I put this away, I want to make sure there's no pressure stored in the lines. The high side still has pressure. So open these up and any pressure still in the lines will go through the manifold and out the yellow hose. There we go. Now it's at 0 psi. So a 3-ounce can of stop leak plus 3 12-ounce cans of R134a and maybe another half can of R134a, maybe more like a third, comes out to around 43 to 45 ounces. This was enough for my vehicle, even though I read the capacity with the additional rear AC and cooler console was 56 ounces. And that's why it's essential to use the gauge set for this job. It's important to go by the pressure that the gauges display, not the total ounce capacity, or else I would have overfilled the system. Do me a favor and hit that thumbs up if you found this video helpful, and consider subscribing for more how-to videos and project vehicle updates here at the 6th Gear Garage. Thanks for watching. Hey, there's a link to my store in the description where you'll find all kinds of rad Yoda merchandise like shirts, hoodies, posters, phone cases, and a lot more. Thanks to everyone out there who supports the channel. It really means a lot to me to see people wearing something I designed.